So what I really want to share with you this morning is this thing that we're going to call visual storytelling. Why would telling a story be interesting to all of you? So most of you are high school students. I imagine many of you are planning on going into college. And after you go to college, you're probably going to go out there into the working world. I can tell you this from my own experience, whether it's filling out your college applications, whether it's looking for jobs as an intern, whether it's beginning to think about what you might want to do in your professional career, whether it's pitching the newest idea that you have, there is nothing that is going to be more powerful for you than being able to tell a story of what matters to you in a way so that it matters to someone else. And this is what I want to share with you because there is a really, really great way to do it. Visual storytelling, especially in an uncertain and complex world, is super clarifying, it's super reassuring, and it's super human. And so you see these little characters down here. Many of us, as we look at the world out there, it's a little bit overwhelming. But here's why story is important. When someone comes to us and they say, I don't know what's going on, can you help me? We are the ones who have the ability to tell the story, who are going to be able to say, you know what? It's okay. I got this. And what we'll be able to do is straighten out all this craziness and be able to tell a simple little story that cuts through much of it and gives us a great sense of reassurance. What I'm going to do with you this morning is first I want us to practice just a tiny bit about being visual. So I'm going to draw on my digital screen, and while I do, I'm actually going to ask you to draw in the air in front of you because I want you to encode a simple visual image into your mind by drawing it out. And then we're going to show how that simple drawing that we make becomes the essence of the best story that you're ever going to tell. I want every one of you to take your finger, I mean it, to take a finger and imagine that this is a pen, and I want you to hold it up in front of you, and I want you to draw a big circle in the air in front of you. Try not to bump too much your neighbors. As you're doing this, I want you to notice that you can still listen to me, even as you're drawing in the air. You can stop now, keep your finger there, and now go the other direction. So think about it as a nice little visual exercise. And I'm going to draw as well. You can stop now at any time you want. I'm going to show visually what you've just captured. You can put your fingers down now. We've drawn this circle. It wasn't just a warm-up circle. You actually, just in the air in front of you, drew a highly sophisticated schematic diagram of your brain. I want you to imagine that that circle represents the billion neurons that you have in your brain and the hundreds of billions of connections and synaptic connections that you have in those neurons. And ask yourself for a second, why be visual? Well, here's why. Do you want to guess how much of that entire circle that you just drew that represents all of your brain, how much of that is dedicated to helping you process visual information? I'll show it in my drawing. Half that entire circle you just drew is how much of your visual mind, of your brain is dedicated towards visual processing. More of the human brain is dedicated to processing vision than any other thing that we do by orders of magnitude. So why do I love visuals in storytelling? Because for 97% of us, for the vast majority of us, we are profoundly visual creatures. And when you have something to share, the more visual you can be, the more you're going to tap into that. So that's cool. But how does that become a story? So what I want you to do for a second is take that circle that you just drew in the air. The center was your visual mind, but the edge around it, just bear with me, is a storyline. There's a line. And what I want you to do is take that circle and bend it outwards. We're going to take that circle and we're going to unpack it. And it's not going to be smooth because the story that we're going to tell is going to have some bumps, but in the end, it's still going to arc up to a positive story. Now, what am I talking about here? Why does any of this matter? I just want to tell you another story. And this might be a story that some of you know, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to be able to add pieces into this story that you might not have known before. We're going to call this story The Non-Hero's Journey. Once upon a time, there was an American kid who grew up in the farmlands far outside of town. And the world was very big, and the kid was a little bit confused, but what he loved to do is he loved to read comic books, and he loved to watch Superman, and he loved to draw, and in particular, what he really loved to draw were cars. And one day, when he was old enough, he got a car. he got himself a fancy little Fiat convertible that was super sporty, and he raced that car around the farm fields. He loved it. The sense of freedom that he had in driving that car around the farms gave him a sense of direction that he found nowhere else in his life, and he loved it. And then one day he was driving and he crashed the car, wrapped it around a tree, and he died. His heart stopped and the kid died. But bystanders were able to pull him out of the wreckage. They got him to the hospital, and doctors were able to revive him. And it took months for him to recover. And as he was lying there in the hospital bed, and then as he was lying there in his parents' home in the bed, he felt like he'd been given a gift of extra days every single day. He died, after all, and come back from the dead, back to the living with this extra day. And in those gift of extra days, he realized as he looked out into the world, he noticed something, that people who worked together were happier and more successful than people who worked in conflict with each other. And he thought, that's a story I'd like to tell. He went to college, and as he was at college, he read an anthropology textbook. And the author of that textbook said, in the introduction in the book, that if you want to be satisfied in life, if you want to feel like you're living a good life, follow your bliss. And the kid said, that sounds like a good idea. I've always liked photography, so he went out and he bought himself a camera and he started taking photos. And before long, his bliss found him. It turned out he was really talented at photography, and he got his first job as a professional photographer. So that kid decided, I'm going to make my career photography. So he went to film school, and he fell in love. He fell in love not just with taking photos, but with making films. And he decided, this is the kind of photography I want to do. This is the kind of storytelling that I want to do. I want to make films. But there was a problem. Because you see, this kid wanted to make really optimistic movies. But at that time, in the United States, the country was in kind of a bad place, and studio directors were saying, no, adults don't want to watch happy, syrupy, optimistic movies. Everybody just wants to watch fairly cynical, fairly dark, fairly complicated movies, so we're not interested in making your movie. Thank you, but no. But the kid decided not to give up, so he made a decision. He made a choice, and what he decided is, okay, screw that. I'm going to make my movie for kids. And in particular, I'm going to make my movie for the kid that I remember being. When I was 12 years old and I was living out in the farm, and the world was way too big for me to know where I would fit in it, I wanted to make a story and a movie for that kid. And so he did. And then he remembered that textbook. Remember the one where the author said, follow your bliss? He remembered that in that textbook, the author had talked about myths. And in particular, the author had talked about a very consistent storyline that you find throughout human history, thousands of years, no matter where you go on the planet. The author had realized that whenever you look at a really great myth from any great culture, the story in many ways is identical. They're all following a very similar path. And the kid said, well, wait a minute. If I want to tell my story in such a way that I know the story is going to be good, what would happen if I just wrote my story according to that storyline from the book? And he did it. And the kid used that template to tell the story, and we're going to see that it's a bumpy but up kind of a story, just like that circle you bent out a moment ago from your circle. Bumpy, but it goes up. That's the storyline. And he decided to use that as the basis for talking about a group of misfits who along that storyline end up saving the universe. Pretty aspirational idea. And he did. You may know this story. The kid was George Lucas. The movie we're referring to was Star Wars. The author of that anthropology textbook was Joseph Campbell. The book was called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. In that book, this storyline that Joseph Campbell didn't invent but uncovered, illuminated, was called the monomyth. You may have heard of this. It's otherwise known as the hero's journey. And that combination changed history. There's Lucas with his little Fiat. There's the Fiat after the accident. There's Joseph Campbell, and there's what was the outcome of it. And when I say they changed history, this is really important to go back. I know this was before your time, but how many of you have seen a Star Wars movie at some point in your life? It comes from this moment. And what changed history was the realization that, wait a minute, audiences actually do want to watch an optimistic, uplifting movie. They really do. It changed completely. That film changed how we think about movies, how we think about entertainment, how we think about storytelling, all the way through into business. And now you are going to do the same thing. As you think about where you're going to go next in your lives, as you think about which job you might want to have, what your life looks like, who you might want to make your partner, there's a lot of stories there. And when it comes time to telling the story of what matters to you so that it matters to someone else, you're literally going to use exactly the same template that has been used in every one of these movies. And by the way, it's not just George Lucas. It's Suzanne Collins in The Hunger Games. It's the same story. It's J.K. Rowling in Harry Potter. It's the same story. It's J.R.R. Tolkien in The Lord of the Rings. It's the same story. It's the entire Marvel comic universe. It's the same story. It's Iron Man. It's all of them over and over again. It's Captain America. It's all of the same story, and you're going to tell it. Here's why. Because it's myths that we're interested in. Instead of having a set of laws, our rules for living come down to us as a story, which is so much easier to absorb. And this was Lucas just a couple of years ago. Now here's Joseph Campbell, and there's a really important part in the story. You all know this. If you watch Star Wars, it was Obi-Wan Kenobi. There's Gandalf, you know it. There's always the wizard. The true wizard in this story for George Lucas was this guy, Joseph Campbell, who had spent his career going around the world and studying myths. And here's what the actual hero's journey looks like as it was drawn by Joseph Campbell. It's a circle, the same as the one you were drawing in the air a moment ago. And the circle goes like this. This is the true classic hero's journey as it was defined in that book. We start here and we move this direction. And there's two worlds. There's a world up here and a world down here. A hero ventures forth from the common world into a world of supernatural wonder. Down in that world of supernatural wonder, fabulous forces are encountered, and the hero wins a decisive victory. And then the hero comes back into the regular world with the power to bestow gifts upon our fellow humanity because of what we have learned in what we had to experience. We had to fight a dragon, and we had a wizard who helped us do it. What I've done over the last many years is I realized, because I am a professional business storyteller, that's what my career has ended up being, that if I could help my clients tell their story more effectively, the best way to do it is to take this classic story, unbend it as we've already done, and then over the years what I've done is I've just polished it up and improved it and simplified it a little bit. And if any of you are interested, here's the way the story works. This is a map from left to right. We start here, we move through the middle, and we go to the end. And you'll notice that the story is bumpy. It starts with clarity, then we establish trust, but then we introduce fear. Oh my gosh, there's someone awful on the horizon. But then we have hope. And oh, everything's going to be lovely, except then we have sobering reality. We're not going to achieve that hope doing what we've done before. We need to make a bold change. We need to redecide. We need to recommit to whatever this thing is that we're going to do. And it's that recommitment moment right here at the center where we shift from it will never be able to be better to it can be. And I want to tell you, here, by the way, when I told you the George Lucas story, I mythologized his own story because I took the George Lucas story and I applied the hero's journey to the story. And I don't know if you were noticing, but as I was going through the George Lucas story, each page was numbered. There are 10 steps in the hero's journey. I told you the whole George Lucas story according to those 10 steps. Here they are, mapped one to one. And here's what matters as you become the storyteller. There is a critical moment in this story, and it will be critical in yours. And I'm going to share one more reason why in a moment. The most important part of you sharing your idea, your college application, your job interview, your internship pitch, the critical moment is when you say, I know how to get us out of this awful place. And here's what really matters. The most critical thing is the realization that you are not alone. There is always with us a wizard. It may be the voice of a grandparent. It may be something that we've learned in the spiritual world, but more often than not, the wizard is simply someone we find in ourselves who says, today is not the day that you're going to lose it. today is the day you're going to win it. And it's the act of making that decision that brings us back out. So I want to ask yourself with one more quick story. Where is your wizard? And I'll give you the answer. The wizard who will tell you you're not alone, you can make the change you need to, is in here. The wizard is in you. I have one more quick story that I want to share. My friend and my co-writer is a woman named Dushka Zapata. She's here in the audience with us, and Dushka is a heck of a writer. Dushka has written over 8,000 posts online that have been read by more than 250 million people. And Dushka came to me as I've been working on this 10-page pitch format and said, Dan, I know that your story works for business pitches, but could it work for a simple story about life? And I said, Dushka, good challenge, let's try it. So in 15 minutes, we used the template that I just showed you, and we told this story, and here's the way it goes. And Dushka called the story Our Rock. And I'm just going to read it to you. Once, a teacher helped me paint a rock. A long time ago, a teacher helped me paint a rock. The plan was to give my painted rock to my dad as a special gift. But I couldn't write. I wanted to write a message on the rock, but I didn't know how to write. I was only 3. And I wanted him to remember. I wished I could write because I wanted my dad to know how I felt. My hope was when the rock would remind him, even on days we didn't spend together, would remind him of me. But little kids can't write. What was a 3-year-old to do before knowing how to write? Instead, I focused on the colors. So instead of writing, I focused on picking the best rock I could find, then on picking his favorite colors. When the paint had dried, I told my teacher what I wanted the rock to say and asked her to write it down in pencil so I could paint over her words. And I had to whisper. I had to share with her something I wanted only my dad to see. I whispered the words very slowly. She nodded, and I picked the final color to use to paint the words yellow. And she used a sharp pencil. She wrote out my message slowly with a sharp pencil and told me to take all the time I needed to paint over those words. After I did, I took the pencil and I wrote my name by myself. And the rock was perfect. I gently placed it inside a cardboard box. I gave it to my dad the next day. When my dad saw the rock, he said, I love this rock so much, it will always be on my desk. And he kept that rock on his desk for 43 years. 43 years later, when my dad died, my sister took the rock from his desk and placed it in my hands. The rock is now on my coffee table. It reminds me, even on days we don't spend together, how he once felt about me. So here's the last thing I'd like to share with you. As you begin to go through the closing part of your high school career and move on to college and what comes next, nothing will be more important to you, nothing, than your ability to tell the story that matters to you. Who are you? Who is your wizard? In a way that matters to the person you're sharing it with. And you now know how to do that. I want to thank you so much. I hope this was useful. Good storytelling. Thank you. Thank you.